This episode contains descriptions of violence, including violence against minors. Viewer discretion is advised. Charles Schmid Jr. was born on July 8, 1942 in Tucson, Arizona. His parents adopted him when he was 1 day old. His birth mother had walked into the Hillcrest nursing home, which the Schmids owned, and told them she was about to have a baby she couldn't keep and didn't know the father. The Schmids locked the record of his birth in a safety deposit box, planning to hand it over when he turned 21. They changed their minds and gave it to him on his 18th birthday. He tracked down his biological mother. She wanted nothing to do with him. In high school, Charles went by Smitty. He was a gifted gymnast who took his team to the state finals, compact, physically powerful, and popular with girls. He was also a terrible student who got mostly D's, eventually got suspended for stealing tools from the wood shop, and simply never came back. His parents, still running the nursing home, let Smitty move into a small house on the grounds at around 16. They gave him $300 a month, a brand new car, and a motorcycle. He threw parties, had girls over, and spent his days cruising the Speedway, a strip of restaurants and hangouts that was the beating heart of Tucson's teenage social life. Smitty talked constantly about becoming a recording star, the next Elvis. Everyone who knew him remembered that. In 1964, Smitty was 22. His friends were teenagers. One of them was John Saunders, 18. Smitty told John that he wanted to kill someone just to find out what it felt like and whether he could get away with it. John didn't take it seriously. He also told his girlfriend, Mary French. He told her he had a list of girls he wanted to kill and that he was going to narrow it down. On May 31st, 1964, he told Mary he had made his choice. A girl named Eileen Rowe. Eileen and Mary knew each other. They had gone to the same high school and ran in the same loose social circle. Smitty told Mary she needed to help lure Eileen out for the night. Mary called her and said they were going to drink beer in the desert. Eileen said no. She had a big test the next morning and wanted to go to bed early. Smitty pushed harder. He told Mary to call back and offer to set Eileen up with a date, then bring her out to the desert. Eileen still said no. Smitty was growing frantic. He told Mary she needed to get him a girl tonight, or else. Mary called several other girls she knew. Every one of them said no. Finally, Eileen agreed to come. She couldn't leave until her mother, a nurse who worked nights, had left for her shift. While she waited, Eileen took a bath and washed her hair. She put it up in curlers. When she heard a tap at her bedroom window, she grabbed a black bathing suit, threw a cover up over it, slipped on flip-flops, and went out into the night, curlers still in her hair. Mary testified later that they drove out to the desert and were drinking. Someone mentioned it would be nice to have music. Mary offered to run back to the car for the radio. Smitty said he'd come with her. As they walked away, they heard Eileen scream. Smitty ran back. He found John grabbing at her. He told John to cover her mouth, then took a guitar string and tied Eileen's hands behind her back. Eileen was confused and terrified. She kept asking what she had done wrong, why this was happening. Smitty and John told her Mary had put them up to it because she hated her. Eileen refused to believe it. Mary was her friend. They led her down into a wash, a low, brush-covered depression in the desert. Smitty told John to remove her bathing suit. John struggled because her hands were still tied. Smitty untied her, stripped off the bathing suit, laid her cover up on the ground, and told her to lie on it. He then told John to go ahead. John tried to kiss her, told Smitty he couldn't do it because she was crying too hard. Smitty sent John to go smoke a cigarette and give him privacy. After a minute or two, John heard Smitty call for him. He came back to find Eileen standing, adjusting the straps of her bathing suit. They all stood. The three of them began walking together. As Aline walked a few steps ahead, Smitty picked up a large rock and gestured for John to use it. John refused. Smitty told John to go get Mary. By this point, around half an hour had passed. John walked to the car where Mary was sitting alone. He told her Smitty wanted her to come. She said no. If Smitty wanted her, he could come get her himself. John went back into the desert. He found Aline lying on the ground, her face and head covered in blood. Smitty had blood on his hands and his shirt. He was breathing hard. He seemed euphoric. Smitty walked back to the car with John. When he reached Mary, he kissed her. She noticed blood on her blouse when she got home. The three of them had brought shovels. They returned to where Aline's body lay. Smitty started digging with his hands. When he wasn't moving fast enough, he grabbed a shovel and handed it to Mary. The hole they dug was shallow. They placed Aline's body inside, gathered as many of her curlers as they could find, added her cover-up, and buried her. On the drive home, Smitty cleaned the car of fingerprints. He gave everyone a cover story. They had gone to pick up Aline, but she never answered the door. The next morning, Aline's mother, Norma, came home from work and noticed her daughter's bed was slightly unmade. Unusual for Aline. Her school books hadn't moved. Her purse was still in her room. Norma called the school. Aline wasn't there. She called the police. The police told her Aline had probably run away. Tucson had a serious runaway problem, they said. Norma pushed back. Aline would never run away. The police investigated but found nothing. They interviewed Aline's friends, and they interviewed Mary, John, and Smitty. The case went cold. 2 months later, in July 1964, Smitty spotted a girl at the Himsark swimming pool off the Speedway. Her name was Gretchen Fritz. She was 17, and when he saw her, he said she looked like a wreck waiting to happen. He followed her home without her noticing. Gretchen came from a prominent family. Her father was a physician, her mother a well-known socialite. Gretchen attended an exclusive private school but never quite fit in. She cut class regularly in favor of the Speedway, cultivated a wild reputation, and seemed proud of it. Her headmaster eventually asked her not to return and recommended she seek psychological help. She had a 13-year-old sister named Wendy. Smitty was determined to meet her. He gathered some old pots and pans, put them in a cardboard box, went to her front door, and introduced himself as a traveling salesman. Gretchen let him in when she recognized him from the pool. She noticed the pots and pans looked used. He admitted they were just samples. She tried to buy them anyway. He kept refusing. Eventually, he dropped the act entirely and told her he'd made it up because he wanted to meet her without seeming too forward. She offered him a cocktail. They made a date. Gretchen and Smitty began seeing each other. A mutual friend described Gretchen as desperate to be loved, afraid she would lose him, and aware that he was seeing other women. Smitty was also still with Mary French and had gotten engaged to a 16-year-old named Darlene, giving her a $3 ring and asking her to hand over her babysitting money to fund his music career. She refused. When she tried to break things off, Smitty simply started ignoring her. She gave the ring to a mutual friend, Richie Bruins, and started seeing him instead. Smitty, who was simultaneously juggling Gretchen, Mary, and other girls, was outraged by Gretchen's interest in other boys. He cooked up a scheme with Richie. They typed anonymous letters to Gretchen's parents describing their daughter's nighttime whereabouts. The goal was to get her parents to lock her down so she couldn't see anyone else. He also had Richie type letters to the health department claiming Gretchen had sexually transmitted diseases. Then he told Gretchen it was Richie who sent the letters. Around this time, Smitty told Richie about Aline's murder. Richie was now the third person to know. Sometime later, Richie tried to reach Smitty by phone and couldn't get through. The next day, Smitty explained that he'd had to silence the phone because Gretchen had been calling nonstop. Richie pushed back. Nobody got under Smitty's skin like that. The real reason, Smitty finally admitted, was that he had taken Gretchen out to the desert and shown her where he had buried Eileen. Now she was using it to control him, threatening to tell unless he did what she wanted. He had told the most dangerous possible person. In August 1965, Mary French, now in Texas with family, contacted Smitty's mother and demanded money, claiming she was pregnant with Smitty's child. Around the same time, Smitty's parents declared bankruptcy. The nursing home had failed. There was no money. Gretchen then told Smitty she was also pregnant and demanded to know what he planned to do. He said nothing. She exploded, came back to demand he elope with her, was refused, and screamed his name as she drove away. On August 16, 1965, Gretchen and her 13-year-old sister Wendy went to a drive-in theater. They were seen at intermission by other teenagers. They never came home. The next morning, their mother Nancy began calling Gretchen's friends. No one had seen them. She called Smitty. He expressed surprise. She called the police. The police wondered whether the girls had run away or possibly been kidnapped for ransom. The Fritz family was well known in Tucson. When no ransom demand came, they escalated the investigation. The family hired a private detective. 4 days after the disappearance, Gretchen's car was found at a hotel off the speedway. The odometer had been disconnected, but the car had accumulated 60 additional miles. There was mud and gravel on the floor. The driver's seat had been pushed all the way back. Gretchen's purse, containing $20, the drive-in ticket stubs, and a business card from a poultry business Smitty had briefly tried to start, had been left inside. Gretchen's mother said she never would have left her purse behind. Police received a tip that 2 girls matching the sisters' descriptions had been seen hitchhiking on the Nogales Highway, apparently heading toward the Mexican border. Officers traveled to Nogales, then further into Mexico, following leads that led nowhere. After weeks, they called off the search. Smitty told the private detective he suspected Gretchen had gone to San Diego. At Smitty's house one day, he turned to Richie and said casually that he supposed Richie already knew what had happened to Gretchen. Richie said he didn't. Smitty told him. He had strangled Gretchen in his living room while Wendy sat in the other room watching television. Then he came out and strangled Wendy. He loaded both bodies into the trunk of Gretchen's car and drove out to the desert, where he left them without bothering to dig a grave. Richie didn't believe him. He said he wanted to see the bodies. Smitty took him out to a popular drinking spot in the desert. They walked. Smitty couldn't find the spot. Then he stopped and said, "I can smell her." He started moving in a specific direction. A moment later, Richie smelled it too. Smitty pointed at the ground. What had been Gretchen was now a black, formless mass, unrecognizable as a person. Wendy was further up the hill, distinguishable only by a shoe and a leg protruding from what looked like a spill of oil on the ground. The ground was too hard to dig. Smitty dragged Gretchen's remains by the rag tied around her legs and pushed them behind some brush. They left Wendy where she was. At Smitty's instruction, Richie removed Wendy's remaining shoe and threw it into the desert. Walking back to the car, Smitty told Richie, "You're in this as deep as me now." On November 3, 1965, Richie Bruns was arrested for threatening behavior related to Darlene's family. He had been obsessively stalking her after she ended their relationship, hiding in trees outside her house, crouching behind garbage cans in broad daylight, ignoring her father's attempts to make him leave. As a condition of his plea, he had to leave Tucson for 90 days. He went to Columbus, Ohio, to stay with his grandmother. 2 days after arriving, Richie told his grandmother everything, His father was called. His father called the Tucson Police Department. Officers flew to Columbus, interviewed Richie, and asked if he would come back to Tucson to show them where the bodies were. He agreed. In the desert outside Tucson, Richie led investigators to the remains of Gretchen and Wendy Fritz. Smitty was arrested. Police went to Texas to speak to Mary French. She denied knowing Aline Rowe, repeatedly and flatly. Then an officer mentioned, almost as an aside, that Smitty had gotten married. The room changed. Mary told them everything. Her account matched Richie's in every essential detail. Police located John Saunders at his sister's house in Connecticut. He confessed to being present during Aline's murder, said Smitty was the one who killed her, and was returned to Tucson. Both Mary and John were taken separately into the desert to try to locate Aline's grave. Neither could find it. Searches continued. Hundreds of local teenagers volunteered to help comb the desert. They never found her body, but they did find something. Scattered among the scrub and sand were the metal hair curlers that had been in Aline's hair the night she died. John Saunders pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Mary French pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for her testimony against Smitty. Smitty went to trial first for the murders of Gretchen and Wendy Fritz, since Aline's body had not yet been found. The trial opened on February 15, 1966. Prosecution made clear from the start that they intended to seek the death penalty. In the weeks leading up to trial, Smitty wrote daily letters to his wife Diane. He had married a 15-year-old in October 1965. The ceremony performed in Mexico. In the letters, he talked about wanting to start a band, eat French toast, send her flowers every day, ride amusement park rides, and cut records in California. He described how a singing instructor in Los Angeles had heard about him in the news and was planning to help him get a recording deal when he got out. He advised Diane to start saving $25 a week so they'd have money to run off together. He maintained his innocence throughout and speculated that the bad publicity had already convicted him before the trial began. It took 3 days to seat a jury. When the judge read the formal charges and accidentally said the defendant had entered a plea of guilty, had to correct himself, and the courtroom stirred, it was taken as an omen of how the week would go. Smitty's defense argued that Richie Bruns was the real killer, motivated by his hatred of Gretchen. The prosecution countered with a different theory. Smitty had killed Gretchen because she had stolen a diary in which he had written about killing another man and was using it to blackmail him. Aline's murder was introduced as evidence of prior bad acts over defense objections. Both John and Mary testified. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Death penalty. Smitty's attorneys immediately began the appeals process, eventually bringing in prominent defense attorney F. Lee Bailey, who had recently won a reversal in the Sam Shepard case based on prejudicial pretrial publicity, to craft the appeal. In the meantime, Smitty was tried for Aline's murder. On Bailey's advice, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The plea was the only way, Bailey told him, to protect the appeal on the Fritz case. Before sentencing, Smitty fired his attorneys and claimed the plea had been coerced. The judge rejected the argument. Then Smitty came up with a new plan. He told his probation officer that he could prove his innocence by locating Aline's grave and demonstrating there was no skull damage. Because his version of events was that John Saunders had strangled her, not that she had been beaten, he asked to be taken into the desert. On June 23, 1967, he led authorities to her grave. He found it on the second attempt, dropped to his knees, and began digging with his hands until he uncovered her skull. He held it up and announced there was no cranial damage, proof that she had not been struck with a rock. The medical examiner's report said otherwise. There were fractures at the base of the skull, Dried blood surrounded the fractures. Eileen had still been alive when she sustained those injuries. Smitty received 2 consecutive life sentences plus 50 years. On death row, Smitty could see through his cell window the small structure, less than 100 feet away, where Arizona's executions were carried out. He agreed to a lengthy radio interview, gave magazine reporters access, and generally embraced any coverage that kept his name in circulation. He talked about his singing ambitions. When asked about his makeup, he shrugged. Does it matter? Diane filed for divorce. She and her mother held a press conference to announce it. The grounds were mental cruelty and uncontrollable temper, and the likelihood that he was guilty of everything he had been charged with. In 1972, Smitty escaped from prison alongside another inmate. He made it to Phoenix, where he found a blonde wig, a voluminous, garish yellow piece described as clashing violently with his dark skin and his rapidly growing black beard stubble. A Southern Pacific Railroad employee spotted him because of the wig. He almost certainly wouldn't have noticed Smitty without it. Smitty was never popular among his fellow inmates. He had a way of making it clear, without saying so directly, that he considered himself above them. 2 inmates, Dennis Roy Eversole and Jimmy Farah, decided to do something about it. They attacked him with a knife, stabbing him repeatedly in the face and body. His right eye was stabbed directly and had to be surgically removed. He lost an enormous amount of blood from deep chest wounds. Charles Schmid Jr. died from his injuries on March 30th, 1975. He was 33 years old. His parents refused to claim his body. He is buried in the prison cemetery. Dennis Roy Eversole received a sentence of 10 to 10.5 years. He was murdered by another inmate on Christmas Day of the same year he attacked Smitty. Jimmy Farah was sentenced to 10 to 20 years and was released on parole in 1982. John Saunders received a life sentence. Mary French served time and was released. Richie Bruns, whose testimony broke the case open, avoided serious prison time. Eileen Rowe's body was recovered in 1967, nearly 3 years after her death. She had gone out for the night in her bathing suit and curlers, expecting to be home by morning. She was 15 years old.